At 0072, we ran over a mole mine. Private Wheeler, riding shotgun, died instantly. The drive cylinder was smashed up through the floor of the transporter, injuring Private Molto and myself. I think the rest were thrown clear as the vehicle went over.
2000 AD has always had 5 or 6 strips in it. And I think one of its greatest assets has always been the fact that it is an anthology. And it is sometimes the great range, the surprising range. You can go from ultra serious to horror, to fantasy, to something extremely lighthearted and comedic, to something very satirical, all in the space of one weekly comic. And I think in the ones that the Penguins picked, they are a really good cross-section of that. Slaine is extraordinarily well done fantasy, sort of sword and sorcery, with a wonderful folkloric background to it. Halo Jones is just an amazingly inventive story with a very strong female character in the middle of it. So that's terrific. Judge Dredd is the 2000 AD strip. So in that, it's almost like what Penguin's doing is a great issue of 2000 AD. And that's how an anthology works, and that's why 2000 AD has been going since 1977.
We pulled all the text out of the actual comics, literally, and just formatted them into a drama sort of script. And then it was my job, I think it took about a week per comic, to go through the script, looking alongside with the comic, and to first of all pick up any details that are uniquely visual, and make sure that they're in the script. And then it's just been a process of, you sit with the actors, you get from them what you want. And I mean, that has been so much fun. So some of the most surreal notes I've ever had to give to actors, like, could you scream in slow motion for me here? And could you sort of die a little bit slower for me? The whole job of directing these things is you've got to bring the actor into what you're hearing.
Savouring the prospect of an easy kill, the phantom dragon could not resist attacking the dying knucker. For a few moments, Slaine's serpent regains something of its old savagery, before plunging to the ground in its death throes.
When you're looking at a graphic novel, not only do you have to get your eye in, I find, in order to work out the flow, but you sort of subconsciously, and I didn't realise this until I'd recorded it, that every character, even though you might have the most amazing imagination ever, every character is a tiny little bit of you, because you're voicing them in your head. And so in terms of their emotions or where they go, they're really only going to go to the places that you would allow them to go to. I was already told they wanted me to just use my own voice, which is a sort of amalgamation of all accents anyway. I don't really have an accent of my own. It tends to be whoever's I'm talking to. And I think that's something that lends itself to where they are living and how they're living. It's quite a diverse, very diverse, the characters in the novel. And so all I did really was make her a little tougher than I am. Actually, I made her a lot tougher than I am, because I'm no cop. And so I sort of used a slightly deeper register. It's so cool. I'm so going to read more graphic novels.
It's Judge Dredd. So of course I'm going to do it. And you know, you read the first 3 pages and you go, this is quality stuff. I'll be happy to do this. The first thing you do is you read through it as a story as best you can, if you've got time to. Sometimes you don't have time to, but if you read your line, if you like, what you are having to say, you can often pick up from the language exactly what kind of intent the author had. So that's what I always do, sort of bow to the author and go, what were they trying to do, to give them the benefit of the doubt that, you know, this is done as best as they could do it. So what I did is then sort of tuned into that voice, which sort of lent itself to that kind of, you know, the God voice, the one that can see all and will tell you all, but is also interested in what's going to happen next, you know. So that there's a lot of that in there, which is really delightful to read. and sounds good even just as you're reading it out loud. You go, oh, that's I can hear myself listening to that. So it's getting those sort of nuances into what could be quite flat narration. That's, I find, an interesting challenge, and the words really lent themselves in this one.
Welcome to the pit. The graffiti ran. The unwritten message was, abandon hope. For years, Sector 301 had been a dumping ground, not merely for judges, but humanity in general. A huge open sewer into which the city poured its mistakes.
I've always been a science fiction nut. So I see this and I think what I love about Dan's work is that he's created a very in-depth universe, which is detailed and actually not too far away from a place that we can see ourselves, if we're not careful. So it's rooted in realism, which is what really, makes it joyful for me. I mean, I'm as much an audience as a reader is. So I allow the work of the artist, the work of the creator, and the dialogue, whoever creates the dialogue, to just wash over me as if I was just enjoying it for pleasure. And I allow my own imagination to be triggered.
So, basics. 3 cults known to Ludmilla HSD. The Exhalation, the Private Sanctuary, and somewhere here, the Red Visor, aka the Sungazers, aka the Shiners.
One of the great things about Halo Jones is, as you said, she's a kind of normalish girl in this sort of extraordinary space and time. And so there's a really lovely sort of human aspect at the core of it all. And actually, I think so much of the story is the interrogation of human beings, irrespective of what time and setting that we're in, sort of us at our very best and us at our very worst. And I really felt that with Halo, and it's something about the sort of aspiration that she has to something better is, I think, a thing that human beings are always going to feel, no matter how far technology advances and how great things get or how terrible things get. We're always going to have that feeling, and that sort of drive towards more than just survival, right? The audience can't see anything, they can only hear your voice. So because you've taken away some of the senses, you have to work a bit harder to make sure that you get across all the story and all the, really paint the picture. Obviously there's sound design and stuff that goes in afterwards, but to really paint the picture of the characters and who everyone is and make sure that everything is really as vivid as possible. For me, book 3 was interesting because it's quite a big shift in tone, and it really is the place where I felt like, you hear more of Halo's voice in that through her diary entries, but that's really the place where you start to feel her consolidating some of the things she's been through and some of the things that she's learned along the way. I quite enjoyed getting to that point, and obviously because I did all 3 books in a day as well. I did all 3 stories in a day, so I really did go on that journey with her. And yeah, the final book was really was a special one.
I know we lose everything, but don't you see? There's no shame in losing. It's only sun heroes who've taught us there is. Sun heroes are so obsessed with winning, they'd even beat a blind man at a game of wooden wisdom. Because they're afraid of failure, of death. They have to conquer everything in their path, riding on until there's nothing left to destroy.
When you do have something, when you've got visuals there, why not have them to hand? I had a picture of Slaine in front of me for the whole one that I particularly thought was captured him, and I had that here the whole time, for example. But in terms of the playing of it, I found it better to have my imagination of each scene as opposed to having like a storyboard of what it might be like. So yeah, but it's, I think it's because the scripted adaptation of it was very visceral and very real. It was very easy for me to be able to do that, and imagine what some of these creatures like the Sly Feg might actually be like.
normally the hero is always doing brave things, right? Oh, okay, he's always, rescuing beautiful women from, evil ogres who've got them trapped in dungeons. And we're thinking, okay, we've seen all this so many times before. Why do I want to add to this mythos? What can I say that's different? I'm half Irish, and I wanted to understand and make sense of what you might call my Celtic heritage. It became obvious that if I was following the Celtic legends, that they did not conform to the heroic fantasy image that's most popularly related to Conan, who's, pumping iron, he's full of testosterone and all the rest of it. And the Celtic legends didn't correspond to that. They have incredibly powerful, dangerous women in it, of which perhaps the best example is Maeve, who turns up in the Horn God. So it was like a journey of discovery. I had to rediscover things. A lot of us are used to fantasy when it's been kind of processed, as in Game of Thrones. So it's kind of designed always for a modern audience, whereas Slaine, it's a rebuilding of the past to say, okay, let's try and make these stories accessible to a modern audience, but let's not compromise too much with the original material.
I was really surprised actually at how easily they were converted into scripts and audio, because there's loads of words on these graphic novels that you sort of don't necessarily always see, but they're so illustrative of what's happening. But also, I guess the images is something that we really want to do justice in the sound design and the music and all of that, and the acting. I think because the stories are so immersive, they're so well developed, and the characters are so well developed, it actually lends itself really well to the audio drama format, because it's such an immersive format. If anything, it's just adding an extra dimension onto stories that are already so brilliant and fantastic. I don't think it's necessarily enhancing them in a way that they're so brilliant already, but it's just another dimension that we can kind of bring to those stories, I think.
The most satisfying element, I think, is that we've been ruthlessly faithful to the comics, and we know that the fan base will absolutely love these. The people who love them absolutely love them. So we've barely changed a thing. It's all as you would find in the comic.
When you take something from one medium to another, you can be truthful to the spirit of the thing that you're taking it from, but you have to kind of, there is going to be an element of you in that story. So whoever takes that on and whatever they do with it, it's going to be their take on that. And I like it because it's like traveling from one campfire, telling a story, and then hearing somebody take it to another campfire and tell the same story but their way. And that's what stories are for. That's why we tell stories. That's why we scream them into the void, so that somebody can hear it and tell it to somebody else. So it's. I think I'm all for that.
Even if something does have a long-standing and a love from people, that if it's being told in another medium, then that's a whole other way of experiencing the story. We know our beloved novels, books, or whatever that we have, particularly novels, because we create the image, the sound of these characters ourselves. But ultimately, I think it's always the journey and the love, and there's a lot of love behind this project, I think, to bring it to ears as well as eyes, and so I think it's a whole other way of experiencing it, which is an exciting thing to be a part of.
Mega City 1. 800 million people, and every one of them a potential criminal. The most evil, violent city on earth. But God help me, I love it.